This is Charlie Mato-Toyela from BlueBearFlutes.com making another video on making Native American flutes. Of course, this video is going to be showing you how to make a flute out of a sunflower stalk, something we've had quite a bit of requests for. Many of you have probably grown sunflowers before and maybe never even once thought of making flutes out of them. And usually when we grow anything, it's thinking about making flutes out of it. So I wanted to make something kind of different for you, and the sunflower flute is something I've made quite a few of, so I thought we would try that. And since we haven't made one in low E yet, we're going to use that. See, here we've got page 79 of our book, The Art of Native American Flute Making, by Charlie and Jesse Mato-Toyela. Anyway, so alternate materials can include a number of things. These are methods of making a flute using a rim-blown design. Here's the old side-blown type flute. You don't see a whole lot of those these days. And with the techniques that you learn in here from either making a plug type or what people call a fipple type flute, you can make a flute out of just about anything. And what we're going to talk about here is the alternate materials for making flutes out of. Page 72. There's a reason these two chapters are right beside one another, because you find something you want to make a flute out of, and there's a method by which you can make a flute. So anyway, here in the picture you'll see me standing back in the background a couple years ago, some sawgrass in the foreground. The one thing I mentioned here, I think the first sentence that I want to make sure I stress to you guys, I always liked a good challenge, and as such I have made flutes out of just about anything. So that should be a little bit of a kind of a it should be highlighted anyway in your mind at this point. It can be challenging making flutes out of anything. Here's a load of corn stalks that we had collected for making some flutes, and here's some that are all kind of dry and real ratty looking, but corn stalks make good flutes. They're, as I say here, a weak shell on the outside. And there's a lot of other materials, and here's a fantastic renewable resource for making flutes out of is sunflower stalks. Now you can make this flute, this sunflower stalk flute, as elaborate or as simple as you like. You know, it can be made up to the quality of say a $300 or $400 flute if you want, or something simple, you know, that is on the other end of the spectrum. It does require a great deal of skill making a flute out of something other than, you know, very hard round material like river cane or out of a piece of wood. However, you can make a flute out of anything, in my opinion. I'm going to show you some of the techniques that you need to follow, and like I say, there are alternate methods of making flutes, and the one we're going to use is the one that most of you are familiar with, which is I guess what people call the fipple type, and you'll know which one that is. It's the one with the little block on the top. You blow in through the mouthpiece, air travels up across a little pathway, and has a block that stops it from going out of the flute and goes across a little channel. The plug type we'll save for another video. However, it is a very, very good system for making flutes just the same. For this flute, I'm looking for something like this, however. So let's get started. Okay, so what we're going to use today is on page 120 of our book, The Art of Native American Flute Making, and it's the schematics for an E flute, which is the one I decided I want to make out of this guy. In making this E flute, I would like to mention to everyone, because it's something that I think you should all really consider and or know, and that is the fact that the size inside diameter of your flute is what determines the pattern that you should use. And likewise, the E pattern that we use here may not be the exact same E pattern that we use for making flutes today. A lot of times it's out of convenience. The one in the book is really the pattern that is going to make the best sounding E flute. However, it may be more convenient to make inside diameter of a flute maybe a 1/4 of an inch larger because of the size of the router bit that I'm using or the type of wood I'm using. And for this reason, we may make a shorter fingering. There are so many options and so many ways that you can change these patterns so that they fit your needs. Say, for example, if you had small hands and you wanted to make a lower tone flute, that needed smaller fingerings. Any of this is going to require a little bit of trial and error. However, I would tell you that if you were making a smaller diameter fingering on your flute, number one, it may not sound as good as a larger diameter fingering on your flute. However, you may need them for smaller fingers. And having said that, you can pull the location of the hole north a little closer to the sound edge, maybe 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch compared to what's in my schematics here. And if you do that, you can use a smaller diameter hole, because a larger diameter hole is going to go sharp, a smaller diameter hole is going to go flat. And if you think that a small hole is going flat in the first place, you need to move it north to make it go sharp. So, I mean, it's real easy, and I honestly, I believe if you read the book, you'll probably figure it out anyway. However, having said that, I will use the pattern that's in the book for this, because the diameter of inside of this guy is about 7/8 of an inch. Now, I would like to mention to you that this is the bottom of the sunflower stalk. I cut it so you can see how thick it is right there. The wall is very thick, and the inside diameter is probably about 1/2 inch, which would make a good traditional 6-hole flute, you know, something around a key of B or A higher tone flute. However, this side of it is just about 7/8 of an inch in diameter. So I cut it so that you could see. This is about 7/8, and I say it's 7/8 because there's a pith inside of it. And it still has a really lovely thick wall, which I really like about these sunflower stalks my friends gave me. Now, you have some unusual shapes here with the stalk as they dry. Nothing in the world is going to be perfect when it dries if it grows natural. So you've got something to consider there. But I can look at it and tell that the general average size and diameter is about 7/8. This end here is just a smidgen smaller than that. So we've got a nice long length. The whole piece is about 22.5 inches long, which I should be able to fandangle a E flute out of, I believe, with no problem. The next thing you want to look at is pick the side of the material you're working with here that looks the flattest, or in such a way that it portrays the best angle that you can look at and consider a flute. So think of where your holes are going to go. You don't want to have a hole wind up there on top of that knot if you can help it. That knot is from the leaves that came off of the sunflower, leaves and limbs that come off of him. They leave little nubs behind, which we'll take care of. But in the first stage, we want to find out what we're going to make and how we're going to make it. I chose a piece this size to make an E flute. I have several other size pieces. I mean, I've got some tiny ones over here that would make perfect little pocket flutes or little 4-hole flutes. This guy here, however, this is the larger end of it. This is the smaller end. This piece here was closer to the bottom. This piece closer to the top. I know this because I have the rest of the stalk here with me, and it kind of got skinnier as it went up, as you can see. So just to give you an idea there, that's what this guy is from. So I'm going to put him down. However, let's go ahead and find our side like we were talking. This may be a good solution here. I think I like it. Looking at the whole piece, there's a node right there that may be a problem. I think we're going to stick with it right here. So this is what we're going to consider the face of the flute. Now, two things you want to consider when you're making a flute out of a piece of natural material is the inside diameter, of course, like we've discussed, and where you're going to put your fingerings, which is, you know, in part, we've decided we like this surface. However, the fingerings themselves may tell us something else. We may decide we might need to go somewhere else. So the first fingering, and I'm considering making the, I'll put that little pencil, there you go. The first fingering is going to be at about 6 1/4, which is right here. I'm going to go ahead and mark it. I marked a slot up here. This is actually where the sound edge is going to be, and that can be just about anywhere. You can put the sound edge down here if you want, then you start measuring from down there to put your fingerings and go all the rest of the way, and you have a huge mouthpiece. This is about the size of a standard mouthpiece for our flute, so this is what we're doing. So we've got where the sound edge is going to be, the air supply hole just behind it. This is going to be the mouthpiece. I may add an extension to it, we'll see. However, let's see, kind of difficult holding this thing in front of a video camera, a lot easier if you're doing it on the work table. Mark first hole at 6 1/4. The next one is going to be 7 1/8, thereabouts. And then the one below that is going to be 8 7/8, which is right about here. Once again, these measurements don't have to be exactly right on the money. Then we've got 10 1/8 that we need to work on here, which is right on top of this knot. However, I can make a flute out of anything, and we'll go ahead and use that just like it is because it's not too bad for me. Then after 10 1/8, we have 11 1/8, which is right about there. And then the bottom of the flute is going to be about 17 inches. Truthfully, it's going to be about 16 3/4 or something. But I'll go ahead and mark it right here with the assumption we're going to cut it off there. The next step is to put the holes in this thing, and we'll move over to the burning table for that. Now in the video here, you may not be able to see it so well. There are marks. You can probably see that one pretty good in front of my thumb. However, the lighting in the shop here does allow me to see the marks pretty good, so I'll be good there. Maybe that'll help a little bit. And I've got a 1/4 inch burning rod over here. I'm not even going to drill these holes out for a number of reasons. But I'm going to start on the sound hole like I always do. And I'll tell you, one really bad habit to get into is to use a drill, a hand drill, or a burning tool and have your hand right underneath of it. That's a bad idea, a big no-no. And I promise to try not to do that anymore. Simply because you can go through it and burn yourself there. That would be a bad thing. You would not have a good time. We're going to put the air supply hole. Usually the next hole I drill when we're making wood flutes, if we're making them out of river cane, that's the last hole I drill. We can talk about that one day. And I'll tell you, that black Sharpie does blend in with this piece of sunflower really well. Now, any of you wondering, did he knock the pith out, the core out of this thing? Nope, not yet. It's all the way in there, just like that. There's that one. If you noticed, I am doing my best to keep these holes in a straight line here so that they're nice and even in front of one another and not all different directions. Now this one over here I even marked on the side, and it's going to go right on top of that knot. Let's see what happens. Need to get a little bit hotter. Tell you what I might do right now. Many of you may have noticed I've got a 5/16 burning tool over here on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and make my sound holes just a smidgen bigger with it. If you guys like my old English measurements, 1 inch, 2 inch, a smidgen. Just a little bit. Hey, how about that? It went through the hole that time. One more hole to go, and you can barely see it, but the marker is right there. Okay. Now before we do anything else, we need to get the inside out of this sucker. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it. You could probably spend all day with about 20 pieces of sunflower stalk and a drill, and you could drill them out. Now I do have a smaller diameter drill I'm been thinking about using, but I don't know if that's a good idea either. It only goes so far. Let's see if I can just push it out. Hey, how about that? You can hand drill in this thing. And one thing you really don't want to do is to bust through the side wall of the sunflower stalk. And likewise, it's important to know where that center is. Now this split is one that happened naturally while this guy was growing, so you can't blame me for that one. Feels like we've gotten to a point that we can't go any further. I almost cringe at the idea that this is going so smoothly, because it's been my experience in the past that you don't get the sunflower stalk out that easy. I'm thinking, oh no, something bad's going to happen. I've made it quite a ways through there already though. A lot of you think, well, why don't you just push something in there and bang it out? That would be a bad idea. You're not going to have a good time. So let's try some hot rod here. Burning sunflower stalk does have an unusual odor. It's not bad though, it's not unpleasant. Doesn't necessarily mean it's safe though, so likewise, we're in a very well ventilated area. A little combination of burning and a hand work on the drill bit here. Go back to the other side. Let my rod heat up some more. Many of you are thinking, you know, I've got a drill bit that would go right through there. So do I. It is a bad idea. Got a dowel too we can use. Just don't want to push outside of that wall. I know the color on the outside of this guy may not be appealing either, but we'll get to that. That's actually a good consideration, something that should be done and taken care of. A little piece of that fiber if you want to see what it looks like. It's just kind of a white, soft, spongy substance. Laymen at home are probably thinking, yeah, that's the material that helps the sunflower get the food from the bottom of the plant, from the roots all the way up to the top. And botanists at home are thinking, no, it's not. It does that through the sidewall of the sunflower, and that material is actually a large structural cellulose that just sits in there for the sake of holding the whole thing together so that this little daisy can get off the ground. Don't mean to confuse anybody by my metaphors there. Well, the top half of this guy is really nice and cleaned out. You may run a cleaning rod through it or a sanding drum or something. Sounds like little people in the shop. Well, I think I made all the way through. How about that? You can always tell when you make it all the way through because it kind of gives way as you're going. You don't want to force it. May not be a big enough hole for this thing. This dowel to go through. This is a tough sunflower stalk. If you had a weaker one, it might would have broke already. I probably ought to quit talking for a minute so she can time lapse this. Okay, so I think we're probably done with that. Just got most of the stuff out pretty good. I pushed it out, went back and burned some a little more, and pushed it out a little more. Here is a drain cleaner, little cleaning rod. Let's see if that'll help any. Just push any kind of little loose stuff through. Looks like it only goes one way. You can't easily start back in the middle, pulling it back out because it's a tight squeeze, and that really doesn't look too bad, I don't think. Let's see, I might as well let you guys take a look up in there and see what you think. I don't want to blind you or anything, but I think you should be able to see in that light. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is use my little sanding dowel. I know some of you have seen this in the past. I have a oak dowel. You don't want to use a softwood for this. That I cut a slit into the bottom of it and put some sandpaper in it. The slit needs to be the thickness to allow the size sandpaper you're going to put on it. So some paper is one way or the other. We actually recycle our old sanding belts this way. We use them again for something else. This end here is where I was poking through and it's a little burnt. No problem, but I've made it to the size that fits my drill. Let's try it by hand first. Now, this paper is an old sanding belt, but it's been used so much it's a little floppy, so I'm not worried about busting the sunflower stalk with it. Just twisting as I go. You don't want to push anything straight through. And if it feels like it's not going, don't force it. Now, let's see. There I am at the end. I'm going to go ahead and twist it and pull it back the other way. Just kind of a quick little motion, just to help loosen up anything that might be stray laying around in there. And every time you do this, you can tell that it's doing something because you can blow more out. I don't even know if I want to put my drill on that. It may be a bad idea. What do you think? Good idea or bad idea? Don't do it? Yeah. Sometimes caution is the best way to go. But really, you know, that's most of the junk out of the inside of this thing. Let's take it over to the sander and clean it up just a smidgen so we can have it ready for the next step. So first we're just going to clean the end of this guy here off. It looks a little bit better. Maybe round it just a smidgen. Just enough I don't splinter my lips whenever I'm trying it. Okay, now I'm going to move over here and trim it just a little bit. The thing I'm going to do with this trim too is important, so little word of caution for anyone out there using a scroll saw. They tend to grab anything that is round and it'll cause it to pull towards the blade, which can hurt you if you're not careful or haven't experienced using a scroll saw to cut something round with before. It is very important to learn how to do that the right way if indeed you're using a scroll saw. If you're not comfortable with, skilled with, know how to, or even have these other tools, don't worry about them. You can do all this with a pocket knife, to be honest with you. Just a matter of holding your knife on there like a piece of PVC, scoring it around in circles, and just keep scoring until you get it as deep as you can and then break it right off. So we just did it the quick way because I have a scroll saw sitting here. Anyway, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and clean up the outside a little bit. Not just for the superficiality of making it look pretty and a nice color and everything, but also for the sake of making it more playable, comfortable on our fingers, and not having these pieces that are going to get snagged on fabric or clothing or anything like that. So we're going to do that next. When we make flutes out of something we've never used before, we would make the flute play before we even got to that step, simply for the fact that you hate to go all the way through from one step to the other and wind up with something that doesn't play when you've got something that looks very beautiful. A lot of flute makers did this back in the 80s and 90s, and it caused people to buy a lot of flutes that I get today. And please don't make people send me their flutes and have them tuned or fixed or whatever. Anyway, although I don't mind it. I don't want you to think that I mind it at all. My idea is I really want the flute to play, and I could care less whatever it took to get there. But we'll take it back over to our work table area and clean this up some. Okay, so we are at the point that we're about to clean off some of these nubs and stuff. This piece I had saved to make a block out of, and you may decide that one of the thicker pieces of that sunflower might make a better block. It's something to think about. I'm going to try this one, and if I don't like it, I'll eventually do something different. However, let's just go ahead and cut it and see, because I'm curious what the inside of this guy looks like. It cleaned up really good. There's a little bit of pith left in it, which is fine, because if you can see them, there's some serious ridges inside of a sunflower stalk. These are actually some of the fibers that cradle that pith, holding it together, and then the stuff on the outside is a moisture barrier. It's kind of interesting how plants work and how this stuff was created. And I guess the older you get, the more you look at that kind of crazy stuff. Anyway, the next thing we're going to do is just kind of gently take off any of these with a sharp knife. Gently, and I say gently because what you don't want to happen is one of these ridges to jump up and follow your knife, and then you trim it all the way out. That's an experiment for a later time if you want to find out what happens when you see there's some of the string fibers in there. That's kind of cool. If you want to find out just how far you can sand a sunflower stalk, you guys go for it some other time, not on my watch. And I'm going to give you some warnings about sanding a sunflower stalk in a second too that you need to know. I'll tell you, I used to, when we used to live in Oklahoma, I worked at this huge nursery outfit there. One of the largest, if not the largest nursery in the world. And my job was taking care of the maintenance of the grounds and the line of invasive plants. I had to make sure that these plants did not find their way into our trees or plants or anything that we had going on. And I used to really dread going through a certain patch of trees. Now I love maple trees and so many trees, and even the one that I'm going to tell you about, I still like it a lot. It's an amazing tree. It makes some beautiful furniture and all kinds of stuff. I've even seen flutes made out of it. But if you have to walk in the middle of a bunch of young, I think it's ash trees, isn't it? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Jesse helped me figure it out. Sycamores, not ash. The sycamore trees have a wax on the outside of their leaves. And that wax that's on the outside of the sycamore leaf is probably there to help protect the plant from something, maybe bugs or something, I don't know. But if you stir it around a little bit, this wax is very dry and it flakes off and it floats down like a dust. And that dust from a sycamore leaf off the wax will choke you. Oh my gosh, was it crazy. I had never experienced anything quite that bad before, and I've smelt burning peppers and everything. That was really the worst. So I'm just telling you this to warn you that some plants have a coating, have a material inside of them that could cause all kinds of problems. So it's important if you do any of this, sanding especially. Sanding is actually breaking down the outside of something into something smaller. If you sand a plant that has a toxic or potentially harmful coating on the outside of it, the sanding is going to cause that coating to get all over you and in you. I'm working on a sunflower here because I've had a lot of experience with this stuff and I've had good luck with these. Does that mean that you need to disobey the whole laws and code of conduct when it comes around sandpaper and what have you? No. This stuff is just as dangerous as anything else. You don't need to get that fine powder in your lungs. Now the next thing I'm going to do is use a piece of 220. This is an old ratty piece once again. It's part of our recycling of our sandpaper. This would not be used on a flute at this point, if not a flute like this. It was very rough and kind of ugly. And if you notice, I hold it at a kind of an unusual angle there. This is 8.5 by 11 piece of sandpaper that I have folded in half, and I use it at an angle at that point. There's a lot of reasons why. Any of you that have ever used sandpaper in your hands, if you hadn't figured this out yet, try it, see what it does for you. And you notice I'm twisting it kind of like the agitator inside of a washing machine while I'm sanding it. Wow, that's a lot smoother already. These sunflower stalks have dried for about 2.5 or 3 weeks. I think it's about 2.5 weeks is what we're looking at. Now, the one major warning, other than breathing this fine little dust in that you see, normally we'd have our shop fan on too, which would blow the dust every which way and eventually out of the thing. You really need to wear a mask if you use something like this. I usually have mine either on my face or in my pocket today so that I can talk to you clearly. I'm not going to be sanding a whole lot. I'm going to do this just quickly and try to keep the dust away. I still have some ventilation in here, but usually we wear a mask whenever we do anything like this or any sanding. And also, in addition to the sanding, you know, the sawdust that comes off of this, or the dust that comes off of it, you also have to keep in mind these little fibers we talked about. And eventually, when you start sanding into those fibers, one of them is going to get so thin in a place that it's going to poke up a little bit, and the rest of it's still going to be thick. Part of the reason I hold my sandpaper like this, which is not a guarantee that something won't happen anyway, but part of the reason I hold it on a slanted diagonal here, like, you know, a taco folded the wrong way, is so that the fibers won't jab me in my hand. If they jab anything, they're going to jab the sandpaper up here, or they're going to jab it down there, usually before they get my hand. Now, if you get that fiber just right, it can still get you instead of the sandpaper. And that happens with river cane and most every kind of unusual material we use to make flutes out of. But even red cedar does it, you know, and western cedar I had happen to me yesterday, so I like to say sometimes it's just part of it. Now, it's not completely necessary to sand all the way down into the quick on this guy. I just want it to be smooth on my hands, which is starting to feel pretty good, and I want to clean it up some. I'm probably sanding much faster than what you really need to do as well. Don't worry about getting on your book either. Those are made out of some waxy coated stuff. The book's darn near indestructible. For a book anyway. Okay, I'm going to blow this off right here so you can see what all we've done and what I'm talking about. Look at all this stuff coming off of it. Wow. Blow some out of the inside. It's starting to shape up to like a really pretty respectable looking flute. The next thing we're going to need to do, cleaning this block area up here a little bit, getting some of that pith out so that we can use it as such. And I'm going to put a track inside of there, and then I'll show you how we work with something that's completely hollow already. Okay, so I thought I'd go ahead and score this just a little bit and show you what it takes to cut this stuff. I can hear my knife going through it already, but just a little like that, and there you are. So a knife is actually something very effective for working on this material when it's good and dry. Having said that, I went ahead and sanded the bottom of this guy a little bit with my sander. You can use your hand sandpaper. If you round up a piece of sandpaper and just roll up in there, it'll work good. And I found that I have a 3/4 inch dowel here that fits inside of this guy perfectly. Does that mean that the inside diameter is 3/4 of an inch? Absolutely not. It's more like 7/8 when you measure it and kind of check the average. And if you look, here's the air supply hole, there's the sound hole. You want to push this guy in there. Oh, a little too far. You don't want it to slip all the way down in there. It's going to be something like that. And then I'm going to drop a couple of drops of good old cyan acrylic glue in there. The permanent fix. You do not want to breathe those vapors. And one thing that would be good to remind you is back in the old days, they didn't have cyanacrylic glue. Did they have glue? Yes, they did have glue. Would they have used it inside of a flute? Probably not. They would have not thought in a million years I should put glue inside of this flute. They would have simply used that core that we knocked out. They would have pushed it to a point that had squashed it down right about to there. And truthfully, if you're careful and take your time, you can collapse the core, especially of a little glue in my hands, especially of a elderberry stalk. You can collapse it to an area that thick. Sunflower stalk, it'd be really close to the same. You can collapse it quite a bit. Just rolling this guy around so that the glue doesn't settle in on one place. It needs to cover that area up perfectly and completely. I might could use just a little bit of sawdust in there too to help make sure it's all blocked off right. So, thank you, my lovely assistant. Just going to drop some sawdust inside of this thing. Let it do like that. Dump it back out. Drop some up in the top, or rather in the bottom. Don't know my top from my bottom right now. Okay. Recycling sawdust, 10 points. 10 points to Gryffindor. Okay, who's falling out laughing? Didn't even do my Dr. Evil impersonation for you guys. Jessie back there shaking her head. Don't do it, don't do it. See, I did say that. Okay, I heard you. Whoever just said I've got to call my mom and have them watch this guy. Oh, that was my sister. Okay, so it looks like we've got a lot of this area both glued and clogged up with super glue. Just checking for light leaks there, which we've got a big one. Might could use just a little bit more sawdust if you would please. And while that's happening, I'm going to use my track tool. Do you have to use a track tool? No. You notice I'm blowing on that smoke as it's coming off so that I don't have to worry about it getting in my face. I'll blow it out. Blow it somewhere else. I'm just going to let that stuff sit there for a minute. I think I may even use the end of my other dowel that I know fits inside of this thing just to pack it a little tiny bit. The dowel has already kind of seized up in there, so it's not going to push it out any. And let's see if we got any light. No light. How about that? And if this is dry enough, which I don't feel any wet glue in my fingers, still got a little bit leaking, but that's okay. I think I probably will wind up using one more bottle of super glue here in just a second too. Good. Can you put this one in the garbage can for me? Thank you. Okay. Dropping super glue all around there, not directly over my face so that there's no splashback, and so that the vapors don't get up in my eyes, because I hate super glue vapors in my eyes. So now, got all that going on. I'm going to go back to my track here again. May have to use a scraper tool. Clean this up just a little bit. And if you didn't notice before, there's that plug. It's actually covering up my air supply hole, which I'm about to take care of with this here hot rod. Yep, I'm doing it again. Pushing this hot rod straight from my hand. And such a thin material too, it could go right through. Maybe that's better. Go like this way a little bit. Now we have a wonderful air supply hole. I'll be using that rod for tuning in just a second. And if you notice, we've got some glowing embers here. I'm going to put them out with this dry cotton cloth. It should be dry. You don't want to put anything out with an oily rag. Boom. Okay, so we've got that. The next thing we're going to do, just in the efforts of cleaning this guy up a little bit, so I really do want him to play. We've spent so much time together here making this video and this flute. No more embers. Let's see if it makes any noise. It's making a noise, but not a happy one. Very quiet. It's because there's a lot of air escaping in a couple of different places. We'll go ahead and clean this area up some. Make this track a little bit more defined. I'm going to go ahead and square the hole up a little bit. Originally I was going to leave it round, but I think I'm going to square it up just so that I can make it nice and pointy. There we go. Put the fire out. I'm just smothering it with my dry cotton cloth. That sounds a little bit better. Still a very light sound, and I think what I'm going to want to do next is maybe flatten this area just a tiny bit, not too much. I especially don't want to deface it. I'd like to keep it looking the same as it does. I'm not sure if sandpaper is going to do it quick enough for the video, but I'm going to keep out of here for a second. Tell you what else we can do here. To shorten the size of this block a little bit, there's a ridge that it's rising up on there. A lot of you may not think about this, but this happens with the flutes, the flutes that you guys make out of wood or out of anything. If it's not perfectly flat there, it'll cause some air leaking. That air leaking can become a problem. If I can have my lovely assistant go sand this off for me at that point right there. Okay, let's see. So the holes look like they're pretty good. Actually, still good. We have a nice solid looking plug, which still has an air leak. Something we need to concern ourselves with. And now we're no longer sitting on that ridge. I think our biggest problem now is air leak. And once we get that done, it's just a matter of tuning it, which is a pretty quick trip. See those vapors? I don't know if you can see them in the camera, but they're coming off of the wood. Anytime wood and super glue get together, it puts off a smoke that you can even see. What I'm going to do now is just go ahead and make sure that I've got this guy completely blocked off inside so there's no air leaks. Oh, we got some dripping. And then we'll get back to tuning the flute from there. Okay, so what I've done is I've glue and sawdust in each and every tiny little orifice and crack that the thing could possibly have, and I can see that it is nice and solid in there. So we have a partition in there now that doesn't allow air to leak out, only pushes it across the track and across this sound edge here. Let's see what it sounds like. I'll go ahead and use my famous ever useful squeezy clamp to hold this gun. Grab it out there. Let's see. Sounds like it needs to be tuned a little bit. We should just take us a moment or two. I'm going to take a look at it on the tuner here and see what it looks like, if it's living up to my expectations. It's a little bit of a sharp E. I wonder if it would make a E at 528 hertz. And we're losing our sound. Must be something clogging it up. Let's see. Make sure you got your track area just right. Nice and square. There we go. And we're having a loss of sound on the bottom note, which probably means we have an air leak, which I had anticipated. May have been where I had the track and the block lined up with one another. Top two notes are flat, no problem on that. But the bottom is a very sharp E, which means the hole may not be exactly 7/8 inside diameter. Because we're working with a piece of material like this, there's a number of things that could be going on. One of them that you might want to consider is each one of those leaf areas have a tiny little hole in them. They could be escaping some air out of those. So I'm just going to quickly go back and put a droplet of glue on each one of them to make sure they're sealed off. Anywhere that looks like there is a hole or a crack or anything, it could take you some time if you don't know what you're looking for. It could take you some time if you do know what you're looking for. What am I talking about? There's a number of tiny little holes in this thing, just very small ones. When you're working with weeds and flowers and stuff like that instead of, river cane, a lot of these plants harbor insects, so there may have been some borer beetles drilling some holes inside of these things. I know when we make corn flutes we have that problem a lot. It's just my wiping rag here. Anyway, corn flutes almost always have some kind of beetles in their stalks. Probably not an indigenous one. But the corn stalks almost always have those beetles, and they'll leave tiny little exit holes when the plant's drying and they crawl out, or maybe when it was green and they were crawling in, depending on the bug. But each one of those little exit holes need to be clogged up. There's a couple more right there. And there is one tiny little bug hole. I cannot believe it. This guy did actually have a bug hole. Now one thing too you might want to consider is that the holes in this thing not only cause an air leak, which causes the flute to go sharp, but they also cause small turbulences and a number of other problems that can really make your flute not play right. Another good reason to be doing this outside is because the sunlight usually will help you see these things much, much better than any artificial light. Oh, there's your spot. Okay. I think that's everybody in the sound chamber. Still sharp on those top two holes, but we brought the tone down. The bottom note is quite a bit more flat now, so we're much closer to an E. But we may be off just a little bit. It may have been my fault. I might have cut the flute just a little bit too short. Being all cocky. Instead of asking this flute how long I should cut it, I just went ahead and did it. It's always best to ask. How is it going to tell you? Look in the tuner. Okay. Enough on old Indian languages today. 20 cents sharp. Boy, a regular music company would go berserk. They'd think that sounds fantastic. Us, we'd like to have it right on the money if we can help it. This one might just be sharp. That's okay. The next thing we want to look at here is the keys. And I've got my fancy dancy cheat sheet in case I need some sharps or flats that I can't remember off the top of my head when I'm tuning something. The key of E goes E, G, A, B, and D. Now let's see if we're going to be able to make this guy into an E flute. So there's a sharp E. That's a G sharp there, and it needs to be a G. So what could we do? Well, we could make it an F flute. An F flute has a G sharp. It goes F, G sharp, A sharp, C, D sharp, and F. Or we could make it an F sharp and go up just a smidgen more. That note there, looking on the scale, is a little bit. That G sharp's almost perfect though. I'd hate to take that away from him. And one other thing too, when making flutes out of natural materials, there are craters inside of this flute. Just potholes where this piece here dishes in, and up on the surface level underneath it's really doing something different, or it's going down. So when you make flutes out of a natural material like this, there is some guesswork involved when putting the fingerings in the right place, whereas with using wood or even river cane, you know, right on the money. So we just kind of roll with the punches. We're making a flute out of a very natural material. We're going to have to make a very natural flute. And in doing so, you know, there could also be a tiny hole over here somewhere causing the air escape by that fingering, which will cause that one fingering to go sharp or what have you. So there's a lot to think about when you make natural material instruments like this. And I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and cut the bottom of this off to an F. We'll come right back. Okay, so I cut the bottom of it off until it trued up to an F. It's looking a little bit flatter now, but that'll be okay. My G sharp got a little sharper, which is okay. And there's our A sharp, B flat, A sharp. Our C is just a smidgen flat, so we're going to use our trusty tuning rod here and make them just a little bit larger in diameter. Let's see. It's a sharp D when it needs to be a D sharp. So, just as the book says, enlarge the holes until they're true in tune. And don't get into the habit of burning your next hole, and just know from experience that it needs to be. We are so close. It does have a little airy sound, which I think Nice coat of oil on the inside might take care of it. Let it smoke out. These two holes are still just a tiny bit sharp. I mean flat. They need to go sharp. I think that's got it. I'm going to oil this real quick, and then we'll let you see it at the end as it plays, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I went ahead and tied the block on with a piece of leather, and I've oiled and waxed the inside and outside. I'm still picking some of the fibers off of it. One thing you don't want to do is rub your hand on this guy too much, because it may still have some splinters that are poking out. Sunflower stalks are notorious for their fine, very sharp little fibers, and you know, it's a great material for making flutes. I have acrylic lacquered these in the past with some polyacrylic lacquer, and they just turn hard as a rock, and it looks like, you know, what is that made out of? That's just beautiful, you know. But I think it turned out really good. I may go back yet, because I didn't oil the inside of the mouthpiece. I may go back and put a mouthpiece up there. I haven't decided. I'm thinking about it. Just inlay a piece of cedar shaped to a mouthpiece. And the inside of the flute body I've oiled, and I think it's coated in there pretty well. The outside I've waxed. Let's see what it sounds like. So I think he turned out pretty good. It actually met and maybe went a little past my expectations for a sunflower stalk flute. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Keep in mind, like I say, the pattern we used was a one out of my book. We did make it with a piece of material that may not be exactly the right size and diameter. I didn't even put my caliper on to see, you know, if it's 7/8 or not. Probably a little bit on the small side. I should have left it a little bit longer too. I cut it a little bit too short. There's a number of things you can do to get exactly what it is you want out of this. Use a slightly larger piece of a sunflower stalk if you really wanted to eat. However, made a beautiful F flute. And I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below the video. And of course, always, you're welcome to come visit on our Facebook page, which is Blue Bear Flutes. Also on our website, bluebearflutes.com, and see some of the great flutes that we have available there. You won't be finding these on our website anytime soon, as they may not meet the expectations of fine flute players around the world, but they sure meet mine. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you so much again for coming to see us. This is Charlie Mato-Toyela signing out. Have a great day, and happy flute making.